Hey yo, welcome, one and all, to the Superstar Spotlight. You're listening to the Ringside Hookah podcast at Ringside Hookah on YouTube. Today we're going to take a look at Scott Hall, be it the Diamond Stud, Razor Ramon, Starship Coyote, or even Big Texas Scott. Scott Hall is one of my favorite wrestlers of all time. The history of Scott Hall is an interesting one for sure. He is a man that has had many ups and downs in both his real life and his in-ring career. He's been a pro wrestler since 1984, and he was a part of one of the most important moments of wrestling that helped change the landscape for years to come. Scott Hall was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2014. Let's take a look back and see how he made it to a point in which some people thought he would never even live to see. Hall made his debut in the NWA in CWF, or Championship Wrestling Florida. One of the first feuds that he had was with Dusty Rhodes. He also spent time working for Jim Crockett in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a tag team called the American Starship, where he used the name Starship Coyote with his partner Starship Eagle. Soon after, Hall would find the AWA, becoming Magnum or Big Scott Hall. He spent time as a babyface. Verne Gagne was a huge fan of his, wanting to push him to the heights of Hulk Hogan. This is where he would form a tag team with Curt Hennig, who Hall credits to helping him in his early career. He won tag team gold and even had a 58-minute match. Hall would get some shots of the heavyweight championship, but he hated the cold weather and wanted to move away from the AWA. After leaving the AWA, he would travel a bit and be in quite a few promotions, winning some titles along the way. Before he would become the bad guy, he had to be the stud, a diamond stud. It was now in 1991 to 1992, he would make his first trip to WCW and work as the Diamond Stud. It was a simple gimmick, but he was able to work alongside Diamond Dallas Page. It didn't do much good and it didn't do much bad, but he was involved in the infamous House of Horrors match during that time. He would team with Vinny Vegas, aka Kevin Nash. Hall would eventually find the WWF, and he would spend most of his important moments of his career being here, becoming Razor Ramon, the bad guy. He had classic matches with many of wrestling's biggest names. He also helped the WWF receive the very first 5-star match from David Meltzer, including the match of the year for the famous ladder match at WrestleMania X with HBK. He would become part of the Clique, a group of members that would use their influence and power to keep them at the top of the card. Still, his talent kept fans happy. Matches for the Intercontinental Belt would happen often. He would get shots a few times at the Heavyweight Championship, but he would never win it. At the end of his time in the WWF, he would go down in history for a moment that helped change the WWF and modern pro wrestling, the Curtain Call, or the Madison Square Garden incident, where Hall and Nash were on their way out and heading over to WCW. They broke kayfabe and hugged their friends Triple H and Shawn Michaels. It may not have been the very first moment that something like this had ever happened, but with camera phones finally being in vogue, it was captured and shown many times. It might have been the death of kayfabe. Back to WCW, Hall would be a big reason that the WCW began to beat the WWF in the ratings war. He became a cool bad guy and helped create the NWO with Nash and Hogan. He and Nash would form the Outsiders and win tag team championships many times. Also, he won the U.S. title belt, and he was a winner of the World War III 60-man Battle Royal. When he was good, he was great. He helped to end the Bill Goldberg 10,000 win streak by hitting him with a taser and helping Kevin Nash win the match. Hall would have to deal with his demons both on and off the air. There was a time when they would call him Last Call Scott Hall, which was an odd choice by WCW to push his own personal issues in front of a large crowd. Towards the end of his time in WCW, he would gather injuries that would keep him off of TV for a long time. But it was a trip to England with WCW that would finally end his time. He was in a relationship with his then girlfriend, and the TNT president's niece on the side. But the story doesn't end here. He would spend time in ECW and then return to the WWE for a short time as part of the WWE NWO. That did not lead to much, besides possibly the greatest WrestleMania stunner of all time. He was bounced all over the place: TNA, JCW, and also the Indies. During this time, he would spend time in and out of jail and rehab, including a horrible night where a booker allowed Scott Hall to go to the ring while still wearing his wrist bracelet from the hospital that he was just at. He had to be held to the ring and also held while he performed punches. It was thanks to DDP, his friend and yoga master, that changed his life, and he is now a part of the WWE Hall of Fame since 2014. The most known finisher for Scott Hall was probably the Bulldog. I'm just kidding. But there was a time when he used to use it. Go and look it up. The Razor's Edge, the Outsider's Edge, however you put it, it just sounds cool. It's a power bomb where the other wrestlers lifted above his head, held in a crucifix position, and then driven down to the mat. Take some time and watch some of his matches. See some of the hidden stuff that is often forgotten. In ECW versus Justin Incredible, in a tag match with Jerry Lynn as his partner, or how about the Classic versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, in WWF versus Bret Hart, in TNA versus R-Truth or Ron Killings. There are some true gems, seeing him go against rookies and veterans of the industry. Scott Hall always knew what it meant to be a professional wrestler and did things that were good for business. Sometimes they might have just been good for him. He's a big reason we have the Attitude Era. He was one of the people that made being cool as a heel work. And with the Madison Square Garden incident, he changed the way how some people saw this as a sport. He had demons, sometimes stopping everything that he could be. He is now on a much better path and has made a few appearances on WWE television. And I hope that we get to see him for many more years to come. Hey yo. It's still real to me, damn it.